A farmer discovered a stray dog with eyes full of mystery near his daughter's grave. He brought the dog home. That seemed innocent enough, but little did he know, this act of kindness would soon send shockwaves through the entire village. Wyatt stood in the cold, damp forest, the shovel heavy in his trembling hands. The soil was softer than he expected, making the task both easier and infinitely harder. His mind refused to register the reality of the small wooden box that contained his newborn baby. She seemed to sleep in peace. His body moved automatically, shoveling dirt, filling the silence. His breaths came shallow, each exhale a cloud of grief. Back home, Vera lay motionless on the bed, her face pale and lifeless as the ceiling she stared at. Her body, once brimming with anticipation, now felt like an empty shell, stripped of the joy they had dreamed of. The nursery stood untouched, the quiet mocking their shattered hopes. Neither of them had spoken much since returning from the hospital. Words felt inadequate against the vastness of their pain. Wyatt found himself returning to the forest the next day. Something about being near the small mound brought a fragile sense of connection to the daughter he would never hold. But as he approached, he froze. Lying beside the grave, curled into a small, unassuming ball, was a beagle. The dog's coat was slightly matted, its thin frame suggesting it had wandered far. Yet its eyes, bright and alert, locked onto Wyatt as though it had been waiting for him. The animal rose to its feet, tail wagging, hesitant at first, then with unbridled enthusiasm as Wyatt drew closer. "Where did you come from?" he murmured, crouching down to inspect the unexpected visitor. The dog nuzzled against his hand, a soft warmth in the coldness of the morning. Wyatt knelt beside the grave, the dog's quiet presence oddly comforting. He hesitated, but eventually reached out to stroke its head. It responded with a contented sigh, sitting closer to him, as if understanding the sorrow that weighed on him. The dog remained there the following day and the day after that. Each time Wyatt or Vera visited the grave, it was there, vigilant and unmoving. Vera, still too drained to question the oddity, observed the beagle from a distance. Her gaze lingered on its gentle movements, but she said nothing. Wyatt, on the other hand, began to feel an inexplicable attachment to the creature. "She's not just any dog," Wyatt said one evening, his voice breaking the silence between them. Vera glanced at him from across the dimly lit room, her expression unreadable. I think she's here for a reason." "Maybe?" He trailed off, unsure if the thought he was about to voice would sound ridiculous. "Maybe she's connected to her. To our daughter." Vera looked away, her features hardening slightly. She didn't argue, but neither did she acknowledge his belief. Wyatt felt a pang of disappointment, but didn't push further. By the end of the week, Wyatt could no longer bear leaving the dog in the forest. "She needs a home," he told Vera, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm bringing her here." Vera didn't respond immediately. She had no energy to argue, and part of her didn't care enough to oppose the decision. "Fine," she said flatly, turning her face away from him. Wyatt named her Luna. The name came to him easily, conjuring the image of the soft moonlight he often sought for solace during sleepless nights. Luna, like the moon, seemed to offer quiet companionship, a comforting glow in their darkened lives. As the days passed, Luna moved about the house with an uncanny sense of belonging. She curled up at Wyatt's feet as he sat silently in the nursery, and she followed Vera around the kitchen, keeping a careful distance but watching her every move. Wyatt treated Luna with a tenderness that might have seemed excessive to others, but to him felt instinctive. She was, after all, more than a dog. She was a piece of the love he had lost, and a presence that eased the crushing loneliness. Luna quickly became an inseparable part of Wyatt's life. Her presence, though small and unassuming, brought a peculiar light to his darkened days. She would often leap onto the wooden swing Wyatt had lovingly built for their unborn daughter during Vera's pregnancy. The sight of the little beagle swaying gently on the swing, her tail wagging with innocent delight, stirred a bittersweet warmth in Wyatt's heart. It was as if the ghost of their dreams lingered there, in the playful movements of this small creature. Every wag of Luna's tail, every playful scamper across the yard brought Wyatt fleeting moments of comfort. He smiled, faint and wistful, as if Luna's very existence soothed the ache that had taken root deep in his soul. Yet for Vera, the sight of Luna perched on the swing was a fresh wound, a sharp reminder of what should have been. She saw not joy, but absence, not life, but loss, and the dog's every movement felt like a quiet accusation of her failure to bring their daughter into the world. Wyatt's bond with Luna deepened quickly, and it was impossible to miss how he lavished her with attention. He spoke to her in hushed tones, his voice tender, as though she were more than just a dog. He'd cradle her in his arms, his hands careful, as if he feared breaking something fragile, and whisper words Vera couldn't quite make out. Every evening, he set aside time to play with Luna, throwing sticks for her to fetch or sitting on the porch with her head resting on his knee. When he prepared her meals, he took extra care, adding scraps of meat and drizzling broth as though he were feeding a child. From her seat near the window, Vera would watch silently. Her gaze was heavy with a mixture of anger and sorrow she couldn't fully name. Wyatt's care for Luna didn't feel like kindness to her. It felt like a betrayal. He was building a connection, a love that she could not touch or share. It was as though he had found a way to move forward while she remained anchored in pain, unable to let go of the child she had lost. Vera's emotions grew more complex and knotted with each passing day. The comfort Wyatt found in Luna became a source of her own discomfort, feeding a sense of isolation that was already threatening to consume her. She tried, at first, to bridge the gap between them, but Wyatt's unwavering belief that Luna was somehow a gift from their daughter was a wall she could not climb. "She's here because she was meant to be," Wyatt told her one evening as they sat on opposite sides of the dining table. His tone was resolute, almost reverent. "Our girl sent her to us, Vera. I know it in my heart." Vera's response was silence, her hands tightening around her glass. Wyatt's words were meant to console, but they struck her like a blow. She could not reconcile the love he poured into Luna with the emptiness she still carried inside her. Luna, as if sensing the tension, became increasingly sensitive to the emotions that filled the house. Whenever Vera sat quietly, lost in her thoughts, the dog would approach cautiously, resting her head on Vera's knee or nudging her hand gently with her nose. Vera could not deny that Luna's actions seemed genuine, even comforting in their way. But the comfort came at a cost. To Wyatt, these moments were proof of Luna's special nature. He would watch with a faint smile as the dog sat beside Vera, hopeful that this small creature might heal the rift in their hearts. But for Vera, Luna's attentiveness was an intrusion, a reminder that Wyatt saw something in the dog that he could no longer see in her. She began to resent Luna's every gesture, her presence a constant reminder of her own inadequacy. "I can't bear to watch this anymore," Vera murmured to herself one evening after Wyatt had tucked Luna into the small bed he'd fashioned for her in the corner of their room. She didn't say it aloud, but in her heart she believed Wyatt was replacing their daughter with Luna, and that thought twisted like a blade in her chest. The tension in the household grew heavy, palpable. as if the air itself bristled with unspoken words. Wyatt remained oblivious to the storm brewing within Vera. He clung to the belief that Luna's presence was a blessing, blind to the fractures widening in his marriage. Vera's silence turned colder, and the glances she cast toward Wyatt and Luna grew darker. Every moment Wyatt spent with Luna, every smile he gave her, seemed to push Vera further into a place of isolation. She would retreat to her room more often, leaving Wyatt and Luna to share the warmth of the hearth alone. What Vera saw as Wyatt's misplaced devotion, Wyatt viewed as redemption. To him, Luna was a second chance, a bridge to a future that might still hold light. He didn't realize that for Vera, Luna was a thief, silently taking the love and attention she so desperately needed. As the days stretched on, the silence between them became more than an absence of words. It was a chasm, wide and unyielding, and neither knew how to cross it. The storm was coming. Neither Wyatt nor Vera could yet see it, but it was there, growing stronger with every unspoken thought and every unshed tear. The afternoon sun was warm, casting long shadows over the path Vera took with Luna, trotting cheerfully beside her. Wyatt had left for town, leaving Vera alone with her thoughts. Luna's tail wagged with the innocent delight of a creature unaware of what awaited. Each bounce in her step was a quiet reproach to Vera, but she hardened herself against the pangs of guilt that flickered in her chest. Her husband's unwavering devotion to Luna had become unbearable. He spoke to the dog as though it could respond. His hands lingered over its fur with a tenderness that should have been reserved for their lost daughter. Vera felt displaced, a shadow in her own home. Luna had to go. The marketplace bustled with life. Merchants hawked their wares, children darted between stalls, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Vera weaved through the crowd, leading Luna by the leash until she reached a solitary tree near the edge of the square. She tied the leash to its trunk, her hands trembling slightly. Luna looked up at her, tail still wagging, its trust unwavering. Vera's heart wavered. She crouched down, her eyes meeting Luna's. "This is better," she whispered, though she couldn't tell if she was speaking to Luna or herself. Her lips pressed into a tight line as she stood and walked away, the weight of what she'd done pressing heavily on her shoulders. She didn't look back. That evening, Wyatt returned home with his usual energy, calling out for Luna before even stepping through the door. Vera, busying herself in the kitchen, delivered the news with practiced indifference. "She's gone," she said. "I think she wandered off." Wyatt froze, the words not quite registering at first. "Gone?" he echoed, his voice hollow. He rushed outside, calling Luna's name into the encroaching darkness. His voice cracked, the desperation raw. The stars blinked coldly above as Wyatt scoured the woods near their home, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the trees. Hours passed, but there was no sign of Luna. When he finally returned, his face was etched with despair. He collapsed onto the porch steps, staring into the distance as though willing Luna to appear. Inside, Vera watched him through the window, her hands clenched at her sides. His pain was palpable, and for a fleeting moment, she almost admitted the truth. But she remained silent, convincing herself that this was for the best. Weeks dragged on, and Wyatt's sorrow became a quiet, constant presence in the house. Vera thought she would feel relief, but instead, an uneasy emptiness settled in its place. Then, one crisp morning, as Wyatt sipped his coffee on the porch, a familiar sound broke the silence. Luna. She appeared at the edge of the yard, dirty and thin, but her eyes shone with joy as she bounded toward Wyatt. He dropped his cup, running to meet her with a cry of disbelief. Falling to his knees, he wrapped his arms around Luna, tears streaming down his face. "You're back," he choked out. "You're back." From the doorway, Vera stood frozen. The sight of Wyatt's elation pierced through her carefully constructed walls, leaving her feeling raw and exposed. Shame burned in her cheeks, but it was quickly overtaken by frustration. She couldn't understand why Wyatt clung so tightly to this dog, why he couldn't see how much it hurt her. A few days later, Wyatt noticed Luna's swelling belly. She was pregnant. The discovery filled him with a new sense of purpose. He spent hours preparing a warm corner in the house for her, sewing old linens into soft bedding. His hands moved with care, a small smile playing on his lips as he imagined the litter of pups soon to come. Vera, however, found herself increasingly alienated. She watched Wyatt dote on Luna, his tenderness toward her growing with each passing day. The sight of him kneeling by Luna's makeshift bed, stroking her fur, stirred a bitterness in Vera she could not suppress. Wyatt's joy felt like a rebuke to her grief, a reminder of the child she couldn't give him. And though she kept her thoughts to herself, they festered, adding fuel to the quiet storm brewing between them. It was a quiet night when Luna began to show signs of labor. Wyatt, already attuned to her every move, noticed her restlessness. He quickly arranged a soft bed for her and sat by her side, whispering soothing words as she labored. Vera, standing at a distance, crossed her arms tightly. She refused to come closer, but couldn't help glancing occasionally. The dim light in the room cast long shadows, making the scene feel both intimate and unsettling. After hours of patience and effort, Luna gave birth to her litter. The first pup, Max, was a spitting image of his beagle lineage, with smooth fur and a cheerful demeanor. The second, Coco, followed, equally adorable and ordinary. But when the third pup emerged, Wyatt and Vera froze. This one was different. Its elongated face and tightly curled fur gave it a peculiar, almost unnatural appearance. Wyatt was struck by awe, while Vera's discomfort visibly deepened. She turned away abruptly, muttering something Wyatt couldn't hear. As the weeks passed, Wyatt found himself drawn to the peculiar pup. He named it Ben, a name he said felt solid and full of promise. Max and Coco quickly adjusted to life on the farm, their playful antics filling the air with laughter. Ben, however, remained quieter, observing everything with an almost human-like curiosity. Wyatt doted on Ben, spending hours holding him, studying the strange textures of his fur, and marveling at his differences. "Isn't he remarkable, Vera?" Wyatt asked one evening, cradling Ben like a child. "He's a little miracle." Vera, seated at the kitchen table, barely looked up from her sewing. "If you call that a miracle, Wyatt, then I don't know what to say," she muttered, her voice sharp and clipped. Her disdain for the odd pup was evident, but Wyatt chose to ignore it. To Wyatt, Ben was special. He believed the pup symbolized the unexpected blessings of life, proof that even in loss, beauty could be found in the unlikeliest of places. But to Vera, Ben was a constant reminder of the unnatural. She avoided him, recoiled from his touch, and grew increasingly resentful of Wyatt's affection for the pup. By the second month, the differences among the pups became more pronounced. Max and Coco embodied the classic beagle charm, energetic, friendly, and utterly delightful. They chased each other around the yard, barking and tumbling over one another. Ben, however, was another story. His elongated snout became even more pronounced, and his thick, curly coat gave him a sheep-like appearance. Vera's discomfort turned into dread. She avoided the barn where Luna and the pups stayed, afraid of what she might see. Ben's presence began to infiltrate her dreams. Vivid, unsettling images of the pup growing larger, looming over her, its strange features morphing into something monstrous. She woke up in cold sweats, her unease intensifying each day. Meanwhile, Wyatt remained steadfast. "He's just a pup, Vera. He doesn't mean any harm," he would say whenever Vera voiced her concerns. But her heart was not as easily soothed. The growing chasm between them left her feeling isolated, her pain festering in silence. The strange tale of Ben did not stay confined to the farm for long. Word spread quickly, drawing curious villagers to Wyatt's property. At first, they came out of curiosity, peering over fences or feigning friendly visits. But as Ben's odd appearance became known, the whispers grew darker. "That thing looks like a cross between a dog and a sheep," one man murmured, shaking his head. "It's not natural," another chimed in. "Could be a sign of bad luck for the whole village." Wyatt dismissed their comments, standing protectively over Ben whenever visitors came too close. But Vera felt the weight of their judgment. The villagers' stares and hushed conversations cut deep. She felt humiliated, as if the strangeness of Ben reflected poorly on her and Wyatt. "You need to put an end to this," she hissed one night, her voice trembling with anger. "This thing is bringing nothing but trouble. Can't you see how people look at us now?" Wyatt shook his head. "I won't let their ignorance decide what we do, Vera. Ben is ours, just like Max and Coco. He deserves to be here." But Vera couldn't share his resolve. Each day, the disdain from the villagers and her own growing fear pushed her further away from Wyatt and deeper into resentment. As the tension within the household mounted, so did the whispers in the village. Ben became both a curiosity and a source of unease for everyone. But for Wyatt, Ben's existence was a beacon of hope, a testament to embracing the unknown. For Vera, however, it was a harbinger of chaos, threatening the fragile stability she so desperately clung to. The village, once a haven of quiet simplicity, buzzed with whispers about Ben. What had once been a curious oddity in Wyatt's household had become a subject of fear and speculation. Some claimed he was an omen of misfortune. Others, in their superstitious fervor, insisted he was the work of dark forces. The weight of these tales bore down heavily, turning once friendly smiles into wary glances whenever Vera ventured into the market. At first, Vera had dismissed the stories, but the words crept into her thoughts, taking root like stubborn weeds. "That thing isn't natural," a vendor whispered as Vera passed. Another added, "It's an abomination. Keeping it will only bring ruin." Each comment chipped away at Vera's fragile peace. She began discomfort whenever he approached. There was no denying the bond between Wyatt and the dog, but Vera now saw it as an ominous connection, a replacement for the child they had lost. Wyatt, on the other hand, was unyielding. "Ben is just a dog," he said gently when Vera voiced her concerns. His tone was patient, his eyes imploring. "He's special, yes, but there's nothing to fear. You have to see that." But Vera could not. The air in their home thickened with her resentment. Every word exchanged another brick in the wall growing between them. "You care more about those animals than me," she accused one evening, her voice trembling with the weight of unspoken pain. "I've been left to grieve alone while you dote on them. You've forgotten what we lost." Wyatt froze, her words hitting like a slap. "That's not true," he replied, his voice soft, but she cut him off, her sorrow morphing into anger. "It is. You replaced our child with them. Do you even remember her anymore?" The accusation stung. Wyatt looked at Vera, the woman he had loved for so many years, and saw the depths of her anguish. "I remember her every day," he said, his voice breaking. "I see her in everything I do. But Ben isn't a replacement, Vera. He's just another piece of life to hold on to." She turned away, her silence louder than any response. For Vera, the sight of Wyatt with Ben became unbearable. Each time he cradled the strange pup, speaking softly to it, she felt the loss of their daughter anew. The ghost of the child they had buried seemed ever present in the house, her absence magnified by Wyatt's affection for the dog. Vera's nights grew restless, her thoughts a tangle of bitterness and grief. Her emotions veered between fury and despair, her mind crafting cruel narratives she could not escape. Finally, the tension erupted. "Choose," Vera demanded one evening, her voice low but trembling with intensity. "It's me or them. I won't live in a house where I'm second to a dog." Wyatt stared at her, stunned. "You don't mean that," he said. But the look in her eyes told him otherwise. "You've made me feel like I've failed you," she continued, tears spilling freely now. "Like I wasn't enough to give you what you wanted. A family." Wyatt's heart broke at her words. He stepped forward, reaching for her, but she stepped back, her body rigid. "I never wanted to replace her," he said, his voice pleading. "I wanted us to heal, Vera. Luna and Ben. They gave me a reason to keep going. But they're not more important than you." Yet, as the words left his lips, he knew they fell short. Her wounds ran too deep, her sorrow too raw. When Vera turned away, Wyatt stayed rooted, unable to follow. He felt caught in an impossible bind, torn between the woman he loved and the small creatures that had given him solace. That night, as Vera cried herself to sleep, Wyatt sat in the quiet of the barn, Luna and her pups nestled at his feet. "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered to no one, his voice filled with despair. For the first time, doubt crept into Wyatt's mind. Had he failed Vera by holding on too tightly to the dogs, or had she let her grief consume her to the point of blindness? It had been days since their last heated argument, but the rift between them only seemed to deepen. Wyatt thought he'd found the perfect compromise, moving Luna and the puppies to the old storage shed behind the barn. He hoped the distance might soothe Vera's nerves. The shed, though small, had been cleaned thoroughly and outfitted with straw bedding and blankets. Each evening, after ensuring Vera was comfortable, Wyatt would steal away to check on Luna and her litter. His visits were brief but tender, his hands gently brushing Ben's odd, coarse fur as he whispered soft reassurances. The little pup's mismatched features fascinated and unsettled him, but his heart was firm. This was his family now. Wyatt made deliberate efforts to rekindle some of the warmth with Vera. He started preparing her favorite meals, suggesting walks through the fields where the wildflowers still bloomed. They laughed together occasionally, but the smiles never quite reached her eyes. To Vera, Wyatt's gestures felt hollow. She couldn't shake the sense that his heart was split, his affections divided between her and the dogs. And the shed. It only deepened her suspicion that Wyatt was hiding something from her, protecting them from her judgment. One market day, Wyatt decided to take Ben with him. He thought the outing might give him clarity, or at least a distraction. The streets bustled with the usual energy, the aroma of freshly baked bread mingling with the sharp scent of hay. As Wyatt arranged baskets of apples and potatoes, a shadow fell across his stand. "That dog, where'd you get him?" a voice interrupted. Wyatt looked up to find a man in his 40s, his expression a mix of curiosity and something sharper, unease perhaps. The man's eyes were fixed on Ben, who wagged his tail but stayed close to Wyatt's leg. "He's one of Luna's pups," Wyatt answered, his tone neutral. "Born on my farm." The man squinted, then shook his head slowly. No, that one's different. Looks like something I lost a while back. A flicker of irritation crept into Wyatt's chest. He's my dog, he said firmly, turning back to his work. The man followed, unrelenting. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. I'm a transporter. 2 months ago I lost a dog, a Bedlington Terrier. Slipped out near here. Wyatt paused, the name unfamiliar but the weight of the man's words sinking in. He glanced at Ben, who now sat alert, his unique features suddenly taking on a new significance. Bedlington Terrier? Wyatt asked, his voice hesitant. Yes, the man said, urgency creeping into his tone. They're small, wiry, look like lambs more than dogs, a rare breed worth a fortune. That pup, he's got the markings. Wyatt stared at the man, skepticism warring with an uneasy curiosity. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. He remembered the time Luna went missing. Wyatt nodded toward a quieter corner of the market. Let's talk. For the next hour, the man recounted his journey, his loss, and the search that had brought him back to the area. Wyatt listened intently, his initial doubt giving way to a reluctant acceptance. The man's story lined up too neatly with the timing of Luna's pregnancy. So, you're saying, Wyatt began carefully, this pup, he's from that dog of yours? Seems likely, the man admitted. But he's yours now. I'm not here to take him back. Just thought you'd want to know. Relief washed over Wyatt, mingled with a strange pride. Ben wasn't some unexplainable anomaly or a curse, as the villagers whispered. He was the product of an extraordinary pairing, a testament to life's unpredictability. Meanwhile, Vera stood at the kitchen counter, her hands mechanically chopping vegetables, her mind adrift in bitter memories. The image of her lost child hovered persistently in her thoughts, blending painfully with Wyatt's recent devotion to Luna and her pups. The kitchen, quiet save for the faint hiss of the stove, seemed suffocating. Unable to bear it, Vera wiped her hands on her apron and wandered into the garden to distract herself with the task of harvesting fresh vegetables. But in her haste to escape her emotions, she had forgotten to turn off the stove. Flames began licking at the unattended pot. The fire grew, its smoke curling up toward the ceiling, creeping through the house unnoticed. In the storage shed, Luna stirred. Her sensitive nose caught the acrid scent of smoke, and she immediately began barking, loud and frantic. Her pups whimpered at the noise, their tiny bodies trembling in confusion. Vera, who had just stepped back from her row of tomato plants, heard the commotion and stormed toward the shed. "What is wrong with you now?" she shouted as she threw open the shed door, glaring at Luna. The dog stood firm, her tail stiff, barking relentlessly as if trying to convey something urgent. Vera's irritation mounted. "Quiet!" she yelled, causing the pups to shrink back into a corner. But Luna, undeterred by Vera's anger, darted past her, heading straight for the house. Surprised and enraged, Vera chased after her, muttering under her breath, "This is the last straw. I'm going to get rid of them, once and for all." The moment she stepped inside the house, Vera froze. Smoke poured out of the kitchen, and flames had already begun climbing the walls. Her heart dropped as she realized the danger. Luna, now silent, stood by the kitchen doorway, her keen eyes fixed on Vera. It was as if the dog was urging her to act. In a rush of clarity, Vera understood. Luna wasn't being disruptive. She was warning her. Without hesitation, Vera ran outside, shouting for help. Neighbors came quickly, and together they managed to extinguish the fire before it consumed the house. When Wyatt arrived home, he found Vera standing barefoot on the lawn, her face smudged with soot, her eyes wide with exhaustion and relief. "Vera!" Wyatt's voice cracked with panic as he rushed to her. He gripped her arms, looking her over for injuries. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" His concern was so genuine that Vera felt tears prick her eyes. In that moment, something shifted within her. She saw Wyatt not as the man obsessed with a dog, but as the same loving husband who had shared her pain, who had tried to fill the void left by their loss in the only way he knew how. And she saw Luna, not as a rival for Wyatt's affection, but as a loyal creature who had just saved her life. "I'm fine," Vera whispered, her voice shaky. Thanks to Luna. She glanced at the dog, now sitting calmly at Wyatt's feet, her brown eyes watchful but serene. For the first time, Vera felt a twinge of gratitude and shame for her misplaced resentment. In the days that followed, Vera began to change. Slowly, tentatively, she joined Wyatt in caring for Luna and her pups. She even began to take a particular interest in Ben, whose peculiar features had once unnerved her. There was a quiet joy in watching the pups grow, their playful antics filling the house with laughter. Bit by bit, the wounds in Vera's heart began to heal. The village, too, softened toward Ben. Once the truth of his rare lineage had been revealed, the whispers of superstition faded. Some villagers even approached Wyatt, asking if they could purchase one of Ben's future offspring. Wyatt and Vera, sharing a knowing smile, politely declined. "Ben will find his own way," Wyatt joked, patting the dog's head, just like his mother did. By the end of the season, the house that had once been filled with grief and tension was now a haven of warmth and renewal. Wyatt and Vera rediscovered their connection, their shared love for Luna and her pups, bridging the gap that had grown between them. On a quiet evening, Wyatt and Vera sat together on the porch, watching as Luna and her pups played in the yard. Vera leaned her head against Wyatt's shoulder, a sense of peace washing over her. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" Wyatt asked, his voice low. "For not giving up," she replied, her eyes fixed on Ben as he chased a moth through the tall grass. Wyatt smiled and placed his hand over hers. In the distance, the pups barked happily, their voices carrying on the gentle breeze, a testament to the love and resilience that had brought their family back together. And that, my dear viewers, is the incredible story of Wyatt, Vera, Luna, and their little family of pups, a journey of loss, healing, and the unbreakable bond that love can create. What would you have done in Vera's shoes? Would you have welcomed Luna and Ben with open arms, or would you have struggled as she did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a tale of redemption and second chances. Subscribe to my channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the extraordinary ways life teaches us to love and grow. Until next time, take care of each other and don't forget to cherish the little miracles in your life. See you soon.